Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome to Start the Conversation About Drug Use, Part 1. Rita, please go ahead.
Welcome to tonight's event, Start the Conversation About Drug Use. My name is Rita Nafas, and I am Vice President of Social and Cultural at Sephardic Temple. Tonight's event is the first of a two-part series, and we encourage that parents and teens join together. Part 2 will be held next week, Tuesday, March 2nd at 7 p.m., and will be for parents only. Please be sure to mark your calendars. Tonight, we will hear from Noah, a certified professional life coach who is passionate in mentoring adolescents who struggle with substance abuse and mental health. Noah brings his personal experience in 12-step recovery to work with him on a daily basis, using a kind and loving approach to the treatment and work with teens. Noah takes pride in his work and has become a valuable resource to the clients and alumni of the program he has worked with over the last 4 years. In conversation with Noah, we will have Roxana Aboudi. Roxana is a licensed clinical social worker practicing in Los Angeles. After completing her master's degree at the University of Southern California, she began her work as a mental health clinician, providing psychotherapy and life coaching, specializing in treatment of trauma, addiction, and codependency among adolescents, young adults, and families. Over the last 10 years, Roxana has focused her work on substance abuse in both inpatient and outpatient treatment settings. We look forward to hearing from both our guests tonight. But first, I would like to introduce Raymond Yeshuafar, President of Sephardic Temple, and Rabbi Sakai, Executive Director of STAR.
Thank you, everyone, for joining our conversation tonight about a subject that is important to all of us. The past year has been a very difficult one that has changed all of our lives in many ways. We are not able to be with our friends, play sports, go to the movies, go to school, and many other things we all enjoyed and took for granted. This has placed a lot of pressure on us as parents and definitely as teenagers. Being the parent of 2 teenagers and a 10-year-old, I've witnessed firsthand how much our children's lives have changed and the pressure they are under. Now add to that social media, blatant advertising for drugs, and peer pressure, and our kids have a lot of hard choices and adult decisions to make. At Sephardic Temple, we believe that it is our responsibility as a community to teach our kids that there is help out there, and we as a community are there to assist everyone. Tonight's program is an example of how 2 great organizations, STAR and Sephardic Temple, have come together to open the conversation with our teens and families to help make the right decisions, and if things don't go as planned, we are here to help you any way we can to get you there. I wanted to thank STAR, Rabbi Sakai, Noah, and Roxana for helping us make tonight possible. Rabbi, can you please share some words?
Shalom, everyone. Thank you, Raymond, for your beautiful words and your introduction. Ms. Rita Nafas, thank you very much for the introduction. I want to first begin by thanking everyone that put this together, that helped out Sephardic Temple. There's a lot of people that it took for this to come together. Ms. Rita Nafas, Ms. Roxana, Noah, Avi from Sephardic Temple. Thank you very much for the organization, for putting all of this together. So without taking much more time, I just want to get into this about why I feel myself that this is such an important thing for us to do. Even though I'm coming to you as a religious figure, but I don't want you to take this as any words of religion. I want to speak to everyone for the next few minutes just about life and what the Torah has to say about life and how life should be. Well, to say the least, definitely the way we are living right now, when kids are studying on Zoom at home. College students are taking classes only on Zoom, or even kids playing with friends has been diminished to a certain degree. This is definitely not the way we're supposed to be living. From Torah standards, from social standards, from whichever way you look at it, this is not the norm of life. This is not how anyone imagined that the world would become one day. But right now, this is what we are in. And because of the situation that the world is in today, because of the situation we're in right now, things have even gotten worse than they were before, especially when it comes to abuse. By abuse, I mean things that a person can do to themselves, abuse that is self-implemented, one of which could be alcohol, drugs, or other things that a person can do to themselves. The Ramchal, one of the most famous teachers in Jewish history, which is Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, he says something very fundamental in his famous book, the Mesilat Yesharim, The Path of the Just. He says, depression is one of the greatest tools of the Yetzer Hara, of the evil inclination. Now, we know that some people might not believe in an evil inclination or a positive inclination. Let's just call it the subconscious. A person has a voice in their head that tells them to do the right thing, and you always have that voice that tells them not to do the right thing. When a person comes to a state of despair, depression, everything begins to go down. And the Ramchal says, a person can make the worst mistakes of their lives, even life-threatening mistakes, when you lose hope, when you are depressed. Therefore, the Ramchal says, no matter what happens, you have to always remain happy and cling on to something that brings you up, not what takes you down. Today's day and age, my friends, it is very hard for teens and kids to do that. They have very little to work with. They're out of school. They rarely see their friends. If they do, it's through a computer screen. If they do, it's very little hours. They can't play in a park anymore because the parks have been closed. There's so much that they're not able to do. And therefore, unfortunately, that's when despair kicks in. And that's when depression comes in. And that's when they start looking for ways to kind of fill that gap, to kind of fill that void in their lives. And unfortunately, a lot of times, that's with drugs, alcohol use, and misuse of different things. And that is something that I'm going to leave Noah to talk about. But what I would say, what I would call my 2 cents into it is that it has to work hand in hand. Everything that we learned tonight has to also work hand in hand in ways that we as parents have to kind of provide for our children. They have very little to work with. So as much as we can, we have to provide a happy atmosphere so they're not reaching out to something else that might harm them. So that within our homes, we have enough happiness and hope that they don't have to reach out to that stuff. And to finish off and give it to you over to you guys, I want to say that this should be, and I believe, and as Raymond has mentioned many times, this can and will be something that's life-saving, this seminar, this webinar that we've put together. This can save lives. I really believe it. And the fact that we're doing such an important task, such a big mitzvah, it should be le'ilui nishmat. It should be an uplift for the neshama of those that we lost in the past couple of weeks to drugs, young and old, as young as 16 years old. May their neshama have an aliyah through the mitzvah that we're doing to protect our communities. I will give it over to you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Roxana Yeshuafar Abadi. I'm a licensed clinical social worker who has been providing psychotherapy and coaching services to the residents of the Los Angeles community. I was asked to participate tonight in this panel to foster a safe environment to learn about something that is becoming more and more prevalent in our youth, substance use. Recreational drug use commonly starts coming into play by the high school years, if not before then. During these years, curiosity becomes more pressing, there can be an alluring excitement around it, and social partying becomes more frequent. There are so many signs, advertisements, and daily social pressures that encourages the use of of drinking alcohol, smoking marijuana, or using more illicit substances. It is shown as socially desirable, good fellowshipping, and the more grown-up thing to do. I hope that between tonight's discussion and next week's panel, both students and parents feel that they're not alone in this process and to learn how to seek help when in need. It's crucial that we learn not only how to help ourselves and family, but also a friend in need. As Noah is speaking tonight, I invite you guys to send in your questions for our Q&A portion of this event so that we can later answer them tonight. And now I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker, Noah Mann.
Hi, Roxanne. Thank you everybody for that beautiful opening and introduction. My name is Noah Mann. I'm really grateful to be here tonight. When I was asked to speak on this topic, it hit home for me. It touched my heart. The fact that this is available today for teenagers, for parents, it's actually incredible because this sort of thing wasn't around, even though it's via Zoom. And I think that's the positive side to this whole thing, is that we are able to do this. And I think this is actually really important to kind of tell people what's going on. And, a little bit of my story, how, I grew up and how my life went the wrong direction because I didn't feel the support like this was available at the time. Like I said, my name is Noah Mann, and I'm a sober alcoholic drug addict. What that means, if you don't understand what that means, is that I, for a very long time, was addicted to drugs and alcohol. And today I don't take any substances that affect me from the neck up. So no pills, no marijuana, no hard drugs, no alcohol, nothing that could change my thinking or, like I said, affect me from the neck up. And that was not always the case. I started drinking, regularly by the time I was 13. And, by the time I was 16, I was into pretty heavy drugs. I grew up in a good home in a Jewish community, and I went to private Jewish schools most of my life, and I started getting in trouble, at a really young age. I changed schools when I was in the 4th grade. I started off in a community school, a Jewish school in the Venice community, which is a smaller school. And I was sort of the big fish in a small pond. And then I got moved into the Hancock Park area where I was a smaller fish in a bigger pond. And that was kind of, frightening for me in a sense. It was a change of scenery. It was a change of who I had to be, the image that I had to put up in so many different areas. I didn't know this at that young of an age that, I was trying to fit in or I was trying to present myself a certain way, but my behavior showed it. I'd be called into the principal's office on a regular basis. My parents would come in and not Noah. Noah would never do something like that, defending me because, the dimples and the cute little smile, I could get away with murder, on a regular basis. And my parents actually believed that I wasn't capable of doing the kind of things that I was doing. And they started off small, like it was little misbehaviors or clowning around in the classroom, not wanting to pay attention to what was going on or just not feeling comfortable in this scenario. I wanted to be outside. I excelled in sports. That's basically what my life revolved around was sports. I was somewhat of a very good athlete, and that's all I really cared about. So the behavior started changing. I went to high school. I went to a Jewish high school for my first year and started getting in trouble, because of the partying. I started hanging out with, and that wasn't acceptable in the high school that I went to. They didn't want us hanging out with girls or going to these little parties. And like I said, I started drinking at this time. So a lot of the decisions I was making, I would say would warrant the school kind of intervening. The problem for me at this time and for the next several years of my high school is that I feel like I was thrown away, right? That the community or the schools weren't sitting me down and talking to me about what's going on, Noah, what's going on in the home, what's going on with you, are you okay? I felt like I was always being pushed away or just, getting in trouble for little things that started turning into bigger things. And then I just grew a huge resentment towards the schools, to all authority. And again, I didn't have anybody to sit with me and talk to me about what was going on. My parents were very confused as to what to do. There weren't that many resources or at least my parents weren't aware of any of the resources at that time. And, like I said, I just kept getting bounced around from school. I got kicked out of the Jewish school system. None of the Jewish high schools would take me. And I got what I thought was my dream come true. And I was finally allowed to go to public schools, and everything really just took off from there. But I couldn't stay in one of those schools either. My behavior just got worse and worse. The people I started hanging out with drug dealers and gangbangers, and just trying to fit in wherever I could, where all the excitement was. We grew up in a nice Jewish community in Venice, and I'd go to temple, with my family every Saturday, and right outside of our temple was Venice Beach, right? We're on the boardwalk. And I had two choices. I had what was going on in here or what was going on out there. And, at a very young age, I don't know when it was, maybe 13 or 14, I decided that I wanted what was going on out there a lot more than what was going on in there. And like I said, I started building resentments towards the Jewish school system, towards everything. And I just took off running. And I, started doing things like drinking in school, drinking in class, started doing drugs, hanging out with the wrong people. And like the train was starting to go off the tracks. I thought when I started drinking and doing drugs that I was just trying to have fun, right? It took me a very, very long time till I got into the recovery that I'll get into a little later to understand why it is that I actually drank and why it is that I actually used. But for the longest time, it started off as this was for partying. This was to be social. This was to have a good time. And many 20 something years later, I was able to actually look at it and understand that there was something wrong. There was something missing within me that made me want to do these kind of things. So, I'll go into a little bit of the experiences that I've had. I went to 5 high schools in 3 years. I got shipped off to Israel and went to a program in Israel at 17 years old, where there was kids like me from all over the country, and we had no parent supervision, so we were on our own. And that's where my alcoholism really took off. I think we were traveling the country, partying every night, and there was no consequences to any of the actions. Yeah, I got thrown in jail for a couple nights here and there, but that wasn't enough to stop me. Because I got out of it, and most of my story is going to sound like this. There was no consequences to my actions, or not severe enough consequences to my actions for me to stop that train. After Israel, I came back home, and now I'm out drinking and doing, cocaine and other different drugs on a nightly basis, hanging out at bars, 17 years old, and then getting into the Hollywood club scene. Now I'm selling drugs, doing drugs, in and out of jails, hospitals. And again, I'm not going to prison for a long time. I'm not dying. Nothing severe enough to stop me is stopping me. So I think I'm invincible at a certain point. My family intervenes a little bit. They see what's going on with me, and they think it's a good idea for me to move to New York. So at 19 years old, I picked up and I moved to New York, to be around family, people that were doing well, people that could be good examples for me. But nobody knows what's wrong with me. Nobody has any idea, what's going on inside me, and nobody's going to help me. So yes, a good job, going back to school, all those things sound nice. But the problem is with someone like me that has no idea what's wrong with them and no way to work on that, it's not really going to help. I find everything that I was doing in LA and New York, and it actually gets worse. I had a dental surgery when I was in New York, and that's when I found painkillers. It started with Vicodin, then it turned into Percocet and Roxy's and Oxys. And before I knew it, I'm strung out on opiates. And this goes on for almost 9 years, right? I have no idea what getting sober means. I have no idea. In my mind, I think that I can get sober at any time I want. I'm just going to stop when I'm ready. That's something that I tell myself, and I had no idea how difficult that was going to be. But I know that every single time I tried, it was impossible. So I just kept doing it. And, the shame, the guilt, the hiding, all that stuff kicks in and makes it worse. And you look at yourself in the mirror. I look at myself in the mirror, and I'm disgusted with what's become of me. This is not the little Noah with the dimples. This is not the Noah, the athlete. Something's changed, and I don't know how to get back. So at a certain point, I would never say I was suicidal, luckily. But I didn't care if I had died. I didn't think anyone was going to miss me. And I have a beautiful family. I have 5 siblings, 2 amazing parents, and a large amount of friends that, started disappearing little and little, because of my behavior, and they didn't want to be around it. But at a certain point, I just kind of gave up. And, I'm doing drugs. I don't know how to describe this to you guys, but about 30 or 40 Roxys a day would kill a horse. But that's where my tolerance got. And I had 2 ODs. The one that was the most significant was in, April 2011. And I came home for Passover to be with my family, and I OD'd on my dad's couch. And, as a result of that, I was in Cedars-Sinai in the ICU for 3 weeks, on the list for a liver transplant and on dialysis at 27 years old. And, finally my family could see what was going on with me. The cat was out of the bag. I'd been hiding it, I thought, pretty well for a very long time. I was also living in another state. But now everybody knew what was going on, and everybody was, came to support. And, I decided that, or they decided for me, that I was going to go to treatment for my first time. And I checked into a treatment center, and, I was going to outpatient dialysis until my kidneys, thank God, came back and started working on their own. But once I felt that, that I was okay again, the consequences, again, were not severe enough for me. I survived that. Again, I could probably survive anything. So why not just, drugs almost killed me. So I'm not going to do drugs anymore, but I'm probably going to drink, because most people drink and it's okay. And, what happens is I start drinking. And not long after that, the drugs come right back, because my brain's already triggered to want that. And if I put a little bit of alcohol in my system, my brain wants a little more. And the way that I use drugs and alcohol is, 1 drink or 1 drug is too many, and 1,000 is not enough, right? I don't know how to stop. I can run out. There's no way for me to stop when I start. So for the next several years, I'm in and out of, treatment centers, with putting together some time sober, working on myself a little bit, not really, engaging in therapy, not really wanting to share, deep emotions or what's going on with me. And I keep wondering why I keep going in and out of rehab. Like, I am so happy with the way my life turns out when I get sober. Right? How I start building a life, and people start trusting me, and people want to be around me, people want to support me. How is it possible that I pick up and start drinking and using drugs again? So the last time I went to treatment, I was as bad as I've ever been. Worse than being on my deathbed in the hospital, it was the way that I had to look at myself in the mirror. Like, I felt like I was looking at a dead person. I've had several friends die as a result of drinking and using. In some instances, it was 1 hit, right? And it was the most beautiful person in the world, and they were dead. I walked in a hotel room where a friend of mine, who I'd known since I was 12 years old, we were in camp together. We were in Neve in Israel together. We got sober together. I walk in and I see him dead on a hotel floor because he OD'd, with a needle in his arm. I've seen several friends, die from this, and I don't know why that's not my story, right? There has to be a reason why I've made it through, in and out of jails, in and out of hospitals, treatment several times. And I'm looking at myself in the mirror right before I go to treatment this time, and I said, this is it. You're going to die, or you're going to get it together, right? But I can't continue to look at myself the way that I see myself right now. There's too many people out here that, care about you. Even if you don't believe it yourself, the proof is there. So I went back to treatment, and for the first time, I surrendered, right? I was okay understanding that I was an alcoholic, that I was a drug addict, that I might be a little bit different, right? But the fact is, if I had cancer, right, I get chemotherapy. If I have diabetes, I take insulin. So if I have alcoholism, which is not the end of the world, and there's a solution and there's a cure for it, then I'm going to take that medicine. And that medicine was very simple. right? It's very, very simple. And for a long time, it didn't feel that simple to me until I actually decided to engage in it. So, it starts off with, going to treatment, and I've been to several treatment centers, but this is the first time that I actually engaged, started opening up to a therapist, right? Allowing the walls that I built up as my defense mechanism, I let them down, right? Anything that was bothering me from the time I was a child till that moment started coming out. And I started feeling heard. I started feeling understood. There was a lot of other people that were in treatment with me that felt similar to me, right? So the relating to one another, right? That we're not alone in this, that I'm not better than you or less than you, that, there's a common bond and we're all here for the same reason. Like one is not lighter or one is not better than the other. And there's a community that came together and we were all able to work through a lot of stuff together. There's 12-step recovery, right? That I'd been in and out of since I was 19 years old when a judge sent me, right? And I'd go into those meetings at 19 years old and say, I'm not like you guys. Like, what I've noticed is that this time around, when I got engaged in Alcoholics Anonymous and in a 12-step program, I was able to learn a lot about myself. I was able, and it teaches me to give back, to not be selfish, right? To teach others how I got sober, to help others, and carry that message, right? Bring to others what was given so freely to me. Today, for years now, I've been working in adolescent treatment, right? And when that came to me, or when I was asked to start doing that, it felt right, right? Because I knew that as a sober person who had been through a lot of struggles that these kids that were coming in were going through, that I wanted them to have someone like me who had been through a lot of the similar things, or the things that they might go through, to try to help prevent them from going through those things. And I didn't have that when I was a teenager, right? Like I said, I had people scolding me and throwing me out, and, always in the principal's office and yelling and, Noah this, Noah that. Nobody was able to sit down and talk to me, human being to human being, in a kind and loving manner, in a soft tone. What's going on, kid? How you, like, what is it? Like, what's bothering you? Right. And a lot of times it's parent relationships, it's school authority, it's all different types of authority, and they don't have anybody that they feel that they can trust or talk to about those kind of things. So, when I got into this field, it just felt like home. I'm looking at little Noahs every single day, and how can I make a little Noah's life better? Right? How can I help a kid not make the same poor choices that I made because they just didn't have somebody to talk to? And it's been the most rewarding thing I've been able to do, to be able to work with other teenagers, right, who are completely misunderstood sometimes, or just don't have any idea the direction that they're going in. Like I said, I started off because I thought this was fun, right? I wanted to fit in, right? I wanted to be a part of. And I thought socially drinking and doing drugs, it took away a lot of the social anxiety or the fears or, of fitting in. Alcohol made me warm. Drugs made me warm. They made me want to talk. They made me want to communicate with other people, right? So when I started it, that's what I thought I was doing. And, today's day and age, it's a whole nother ballgame. The access that kids have to things, the images that are portrayed on social media, the music, every single rap song today is rapping about, Xanax and all these other, and promethazine and all these other drugs. And they're making it sound like they make it sound exciting. Like this is a lifestyle that we want to live. And, firsthand experience, I've seen a lot of friends die because of these things, right? I've been on my deathbed because of those things. And, it's really scary to me to see how much faster and harder the kids are going today than I did. And like I said, I was a really, really bad one, right? I was off to the races at 16 years old, 17 years old, nonstop. And today I see kids coming into treatment 13 years old that have done, you know, a lot of the same things that I've done. And I really believe that a lot of it has to do with the access to social media, how they portray the world, the images that they have to put up. And it's really scary, you know. So working in the industry that I work in, it has been not just, you know, special, you know, to me for getting to work with the kids, but what the kids that I work with do for me on a daily basis remind me of where I came from and where I'm going, you know, on a daily basis. They build me up. I have to practice what I preach. If I'm teaching kids how to, you know, make their beds in the morning or do their laundry, or, you know, teach them how to cook so they can feed themselves, you know, like life skills. I have to practice what I preach. And because of that, I grow on a daily basis. You know, I'll just bringing it back to the access that is here today, right? Like this is something that never happened when I was in school. We didn't have people coming in, you know, out of prisons or, you know, out of rehabs, or people with several years sober coming and talking to us about prevention. There's a lot more access to these kind of things today. And I'm grateful that I was asked to talk a little bit and, you know, share some of my experiences, you know, with you guys. You know, there are a lot of resources today, you know, for the parents, for the kids that are listening to this. You know, I am 100% available at any time to talk to anybody. You know, if you feel like your kid is going in some direction, they're hiding, they're isolated, you know, the major signs that something is up. And it doesn't always have to be drug addiction, but they could be, you know, just depressed or anxious, as the rabbi was talking about. These things are just as deadly as you know, alcoholism and drug addiction. And some kids and some adults, you know, just turn to drugs and alcohol because of those things. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Yeah, thank you for allowing me to do this tonight.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you for sharing your story. So some questions that we have. So one thing that I was wondering if you can shed some light on is, how have you seen quarantine? I know that you've talked about how social media now has impacted, but what about quarantine and the isolation that people are going through? How has that impacted teens and substance use?
So from what I've seen, you know, I've had a lot of friends that were in treatment when quarantine started, or friends that were, you know, newly sober, or even some with several years sober, right? And a lot more, and I'll talk about the teens too, but, you know, isolation is a scary thing for people. And it brings out the worst. I've seen more deaths, you know, in COVID, you know, in this last year than, you know, from overdoses or suicide. And it all has to do with being isolated, not being able to do the normal things that we do on a daily basis. It's really sad. It's unfortunate, but that doesn't have to continue to be the case. You know, if people have a place to reach out for help, if they have, you know, therapists that they could talk to, or, you know, counselors, or, you know, treatment centers that they have available to them, this doesn't have to be the case. But I have definitely seen a spike in it, unfortunately. Yeah.
So going back to your story and growing up, I know after being involved in it for a little bit, drugs become more accessible once you know, but initially, how were you getting a hold of the drug?
So we grew up in like a Jewish home. We have, you know, Friday night dinners all the time, and, you know, people over for lunch on Saturdays. My parents always had a lot of alcohol in the house, so it started in the house. You know, then in Shul, right, like in Temple, there was a lot of alcohol, and I was able to sneak it. So and then it turned into, you know, going to the store and asking somebody to buy it for me, you know, or just giving them someone outside that looked willing to make a couple dollars and offering them money to buy me booze, you know. And then, you know, weed and the other drugs, just the same. You know, you find people that are, I was looking for it, and I was going to find it no matter where I ever went. I was able to find it if that was my goal.
Financially, how did you find the money to pay for it?
It's all part of the behaviors: stealing from my parents, from a lot of different places, I was a very, I started young, and then at 17 years old, I was working full time in school and working. So I was able to support that, but in a weekend I could blow a paycheck, like this.
So while you were in school growing up, were you ever caught being smoking or drinking while you were at school?
Yes. I mean, that was in high school. Yes.
So,
and like I said, I did go to 5 high schools in 3 years because of a lot of the behaviors, but there was never like an intervention where let's talk, let's discuss this. How could we do better? What can we do to help you? It was, you're out.
So who do you think you would be more receptive to, like, for an intervention like that?
I mean, if I want to go back and think about how I wish it was done, like my story is my story for a reason. And I don't regret anything anymore, right? Because my story today is my biggest asset, right? It allows me to help the kids, the adults that I get to work with. But if we do go back, I would love for, like I said, for somebody to have sat down with me, someone like me, for the school to be able to bring someone in, or for or my parents to like have had access to somebody, hey, Noah, this is so-and-so. He's been through this, and this, and he just wants to talk to you, kind of get to know. And that would have been nice if that was available.
So, what do you think, like, if you're just looking back, what do you think was the thing that just helped you the most in your recovery? Was it just surrendering to it? What do you think, like, was that shift?
I think for me, or I know for me, it was the way I was treated when I walked in the doors, right? That I was accepted, that I wasn't judged, that, like I said, I wasn't being scolded, I wasn't in trouble. It was, you're a person, you're like a good soul, and we're going to help you get back to, who you want to be. People talk to me kindly and softly and loving, and help me. They pick me up. They put me back together with my willingness, right? Again, all the other times that I wasn't willing, it didn't work out too well. But the way that people talked to me, the way that they accepted me and didn't judge me, allowed me to feel comfortable, opening up to them, and wanting to have a purpose and a reason to live.
Yeah. What was it like having to go back to real life and getting back into work and dating and relationships, sober?
So those are probably like the scariest things, and we see a lot of kids, adults relapse over those sort of things. We'll talk about after treatment. That's probably the scariest thing. For adults, there's a lot of options when you finish treatment. There's step down treatment, like sober living, which is like another. It's a less like a lower level of care than residential treatment. Where you're in a sober home, living with other people who are doing the same things, and you start working. And if you have a hard day, at least you're in an coming home to a safe environment where you're not on your own, where you're not triggered to drink or to get high because you had a rough day, until you actually build up, the strength to be able to go out in the real world on your own and do it again. What was the other part of the question? Oh, dating. It's uncomfortable, right? What I've learned in getting sober is that the disease of alcoholism centers in my mind. For me, it's a fear-based disease, right? I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not. But when I built myself up in my recovery, I find out that all that stuff's not true, right? I get to learn about who I am, what my strengths are. And it's a little scary, doing this sober for the first time. Like I said, I was getting loaded since I was a teenager and never dated anybody sober until I got sober this time. And, you walk through those fears, right? You don't give up because it's uncomfortable. Many, many times I was one of those people that relapsed because those were uncomfortable things for me. And today that's not the case, because I worked on myself enough to feel safe and comfortable in those sort of environments or situations. Public speaking is one of those things.
So when we talk about addiction, right, there is substances, but then I think right now something that we're seeing a lot of while people are home and in quarantine is gaming. And I see this as a big theme a lot. So, there is so many kids that I can say right now that aren't necessarily into using substances, drinking alcohol, whatnot. But do you see a correlation between like that addiction to like the video gaming or being on social media and use later on in life?
I'm not sure if there's a correlation between that and drug use and alcoholism, but it's the same isolation, right? We're hiding, from something, and we're doing something else to mask it. And that's one of the biggest things for parents to look out for is when a kid is isolating and, isn't doing anything, doesn't want to get off the couch, stuck and glued to the TV. Now, it's a good question when it comes to quarantine, because in the beginning of this quarantine, what else was there to do but stay home for some people? But I wouldn't, correlate the two. But what I would say is that they're very similar behaviors, right? Just being alone, being depressed, not getting off the couch, glued to the TV, glued to the game console or to social media. And we do have kids that come into treatment for gaming addictions.
Right. Because I think one thing that people forget is that addictions aren't only to drugs and alcohol, right? There is such a wide variety of addictions that could be treated.
Absolutely.
So would you say now that marijuana has become legal, are you seeing more of an abuse of marijuana, or are you seeing more of an uptake in people using more illicit drugs?
I think I don't know, like, if I would say that marijuana has changed much. I mean, the access to it's obviously a lot easier in vape pens and, just different ways to do it in food forms and, everything like that. I feel like that was a problem, when I was a kid too. It's definitely a gateway drug. Most kids don't want to hear that. I didn't want to hear that. But in today's day and age, like I said, the way that the kids are going harder and faster than I was, I see that for sure. I see kids coming in full-blown heroin addicts at 14 years old, or meth, whatever the case is. I think it's a lot worse off in today's time than it was when I was in my teens. And it's really scary because they're lacing everything with fentanyl. I have so many friends OD'd, so many people that I know OD'd. There was never fentanyl in cocaine. There was never fentanyl in meth. There was never fentanyl in Xanax. It doesn't make sense. You don't put those drugs together. But now it's in everything, and you're not safe. Like, there is I wouldn't want to buy drugs off the street today. It's a death sentence.
Yeah. So oftentimes in this line of work, we see parents out of fear enabling their kids' use, right? So my question to you is, so you growing up, do you think that your parents, because they knew, right? Because your school had caught you, and so they knew. So in that situation, what do you think would have been an appropriate boundary that could have helped you rather than enable you to continue or whatnot?
So I think for the longest time, like, my parents were in denial, which is the number one offender, right? Like, them being in denial of it, the fact that they always thought that I wasn't the kid that could do that. And then when it started coming to light, like I said, today, there's a lot more resources, right? Like, I would love for my parents to have had access to some of the treatment centers, the teen treatment centers, or, the therapist that works so well with teenagers, or get them in a program, right? Or get them just some counseling, or some coaching or some mentoring, or, just somebody to intervene and, not necessarily like that's not a punishment, right? It's someone to come in and coach you on the decisions you're making, where they're going to go, and how can we turn this around by finding out what's actually going on inside of you, right? Like, you have to be heard. We have to know what's going on. Obviously, there's something going on that's making you want to make these choices and do these things. You might not even be aware of them, but if you get to talk to somebody, they might come up, or might come out, and change the direction of where you're headed. Right? Because
Right. Yeah. And how do you suggest a teen approach someone for help, or someone approach a teen for help in a way that wouldn't push them off, that's not scary, that doesn't come off as judgmental? How could that?
I don't think most teens are going to ask for the help. That's just a fact. I mean, most of the kids that come into treatment are not there willingly. Some of them have like a small amount of willingness, which is great. I think it's just something that parents have to do, right? As the parent, as the guardian. There's several levels of treatment for teenagers. There's the low level of care, like outpatient, where they go a couple hours a day. There's mentoring, there's counseling, there's where someone just comes and meets with you and hangs out with you. We go play basketball, or baseball, or golf, or whatever something that you enjoy doing, or you did enjoy doing as a kid. Then there's residential treatment center, where you're away from home for 30, 60, 90 days, right? There's wilderness programs where you get sent off, So I do think that the earliest intervention is something like somebody that comes in and mentors you or coaches you, or a lower level of care, like an outpatient program. But if you're not willing to change your behaviors, or when the help is being given to you or offered to you, then you're looking at, higher levels of care, which are less appealing.
I think oftentimes teens tend to cover up for each other because it's their friends. So if a teen is noticing that one of their friends is, needs help, how would you suggest the teen either, do you think they should approach their friend? Who do you think they can go to other than a parent?
So I think this is like a really important piece, for the teen part and for the parent part. The teen part, if these are your friends, if this is someone you actually care about, you can sit there and get worried about what they're going to do when they find out you told somebody, right? And how that's going to affect your relationship, or you can worry about saving their life, right? So is a friend being upset at you for a few days or a few weeks or a year, is that worse off than them saving your life and maybe them recognizing that later, and appreciating it? And for the parents, I know growing up in the Jewish community, there's a lot of shame and guilt in a kid having an addiction or a mental health issue. We don't talk about it. The same thing, right? Like the family name, we don't want to tarnish the family name, right? It's great up until, people are at your house making a shiva call because the pride was too much, to talk about it or to reach out for help. So what's more important, right? Waiting till it's too late, or denying it, or sweeping it under the rug, or pretending like it's not there and pretending it's going to go away, or doing something about it, at all costs, right? Saving someone's life, whether it's your friend or your child, again, I've seen too many friends die because nobody did anything. Nobody said anything. And I'm guilty of that too. There was friends where I could have said something, and I didn't. And I wish I had.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's also important to recognize for the parents that if and when someone does ask for help, to be able to remain calm in situations like that, right? To not scare off the person who is asking for the help. I think emotions often get the best of us.
100%. And it's a very scary thing. I'm not a parent, but I can imagine as a parent, finding out that your kid is messing with some, drugs, or in the beginning stages or in the middle stages, wherever it is, it's a very scary thought. But how you approach it when that does come up, if it does come up, is very important. You don't want to scare the kid to running out the door, right? The kid runs out the door when he's found out, that whatever decisions he makes that night could be life altering.
Mm-hmm.
He might not make it home that night.
Right. And I think same goes for kids who are struggling with more the mental health piece of it, which is the anxiety and the depression as well. Correct? Yeah.
Okay.
So what was treatment like for you? Because I think oftentimes on TV, you see this like beautiful, it looks like a vacation, right? And I think that's what people are seeing. So maybe you can speak to some of the reality of what it was like.
So I've been to a few different treatment centers, and most of them were pretty nice. And as I'm advertised on TV, so to speak, most of the treatment centers, except for like the state funded ones, are like are actually pretty nice treatment centers. They're a comfortable place. What was it like? For the first couple times I went, I wasn't comfortable there. I didn't want to be there. I felt like I had to be there. And for me, it was tough. Someone that was so guarded my whole life and kept everything here. It was very hard to allow that stuff to start coming out. I wish, if I could go back, that's something that I did my first time. That when I got the treatment, not fighting the idea or the fact that I'm there, engaging in it, embracing it, it would have saved me 10 something years of misery,
Yeah. And I'm sure the detox experience was very eye-opening for you.
So I have done that several times, and I try to do that on my own several times. Coming off of hard drugs is a nightmare. And that's another reason why people don't stop. It's because it's too painful.
Unfortunately, I think we lost Noah.
Yeah. Okay. So
It's okay.
Okay, yeah. So we're gonna conclude our Q&A portion for tonight, and Rita, I'm gonna bring you back in.
Well, I think Noah is back.
Sorry about that. Got cut off there.
No, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I think that was it. It's just I love the fact that you guys put this together, and to kind of talk about something that is a really difficult thing to talk about, and to show that there is support. There are a lot of resources. It seems like everybody that's in this room is willing to help and available. Like I said, I myself am available to parents, to teens, and I want to be able to help people, get what I got, a chance at another life, a chance at a really amazing life, from a kid that, didn't think that he was going anywhere, that like thought he was going to die in the gutter. I have an incredible life today, and I want every single kid that I work with or might work with to have the same chance, that they don't have to live off those feelings. There's a way to work through them, and to find true inner happiness. It's available. It might not feel like that on a lot of days, but it's there. It's possible. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Noah. And if do you want to share your contact info if anybody wanted to get in touch with you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Noah. Thank you so much for being here tonight and for sharing your journey with us and using your story to impact positive change. Wow. Thank you, Roxana, for leading the Q&A session for tonight. And thank you all for joining us here tonight. We hope you found tonight's program informative. In a moment, we will share on the screen multiple organizations and resources that are available to teens and families. We will also post the same information on our website at sephardictemple.org. And if you'd like to get in contact with Noah, you may call the office and get his information. Next week, we will continue our conversation with a panel of experts to help parents identify warning signs and learn about the resources available to them. We look forward to seeing you next week. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. See you next week, hopefully.
Thank you.